When you're making a documentary, there's so many times where you're going into a location or an environment that is completely uncontrolled and you have no idea what this place looks like. As a cinematographer, you need to have a reason, a motivation for your shots. And the driving force behind any shot in your documentary or film should be the story. Being prepared, especially when you're going into a location that you've never been to before, is so important because that's going to help you answer some of the questions that you have for your lighting or your camera movement or lack thereof camera movement, and even the composition for your scene. Taking a look at my latest film, I set rules for this particular scene in the mosque, and the rules were minimal movement, very shallow depth of field, and my goal, as much as I possibly could control, was to create some sort of symmetry with the composition. And the reason why I set these specific rules for myself is because I wanted this to sort of represent this moment of peace and isolation for our character. This is where he kind of gets his clarity and where he draws his inspiration from. And to me, to tell that story visually and just thinking about it a lot deeper than what it would look like and what it would feel like, I wanted to make sure that the shots felt nice and stable, and I wanted most of the shots to be locked off, like on a tripod, or if I was going handheld, to be very minimal movement. And the reason why I wanted symmetry in the shot, because I was looking for a sense of balance and stability in the shot, and something that feels grounded, so our character and our viewer feels like this moment in time is grounded and it's secure. But if you take a look at the training scenes, I wanted there to be constant movement. I wanted it to feel like there was a constant shaking, and that's why I went a lot of the times handheld without a gimbal or even an easy rig, because I wanted it to feel like you were in that moment. Having that contrast and that duality of really calm, centered footage versus really shaky, chaotic, having both of those created this sort of contrast that I really liked. And it also represented who our character is as a person. So I just want to take a quick second and talk about pieces of gear that I think every cinematographer should have. The first one that I want to talk about is a strong, powerful light. I really have been enjoying this new GVM Pro Series. I got the 650B, and it's been a huge lifesaver and a game changer when it comes to really lighting scenes and leveling up my cinematography. If you just walk into someone's house or a location that you're supposed to be filming in and you don't have strong lights or lights at all, you're kind of just accepting whatever you're given instead of transforming the space that you're in and really trying to capture what your vision is for this film. So I strongly suggest that you go out and get yourself at least one or two lights that are powerful enough to light a vast range of scenes. So something like a 300 or even a 600 watt light could really expand your ability to light a scene. Now, the next piece of gear that I suggest every cinematographer should have is at least one prime lens. What I love about prime lenses is that typically they tend to be a little bit sharper, and they have most of the time a lower aperture than zoom lenses, which in return usually gives a quote-unquote cinematic shot. The other thing that I love about having prime lenses is that it forces you to kind of move around. You have to kind of force yourself to get up and use your feet to move around and find your shot. I think that when you're forced to move around, you find more interesting angles and better ways to frame your shot and frame your subject. So just something to think about for prime versus zoom lenses. I really highly suggest that you at least own one, and my suggestion would be a 50mm prime lens. And if you guys want to check out the Sigma Art, I have a link down below. You guys can check that link out. I love that lens. It's like literally my favorite lens that I have. Another piece of gear that has vastly improved my cinematography is a haze machine. This is a trick that's been used in Hollywood for decades, and the reason why a lot of cinematographers swear by it is because using haze adds a lot of depth and character to your image, which creates an overall more interesting shot. And if you guys can see in all of these scenes in the mosque, we shot a ton of haze into the atmosphere, and it just gives a lot of interesting light rays. As you can see in the back of those windows, there's a ton of light rays coming through those windows, which overall creates just a more interesting shot. Now that we talked about the planning aspect and the gear, I think it's important to just understand one really easy concept that once I understood and once I got in my filmmaking career, something kind of snapped and I was like, oh man, that's how you create a cinematic shot every single time you shoot something. And the simplest way that I could describe this, and I know it sounds so simple, but it's putting your subject between your camera and your light source. And once you do that, you're gonna start to see that majority of the time, that's how you're gonna get a really cinematic shot. What you're gonna do is film on the dark side of your subject. Again, this sounds super simple, but that is what creates interesting shadows and depth. But most importantly, once you understand this concept, everything kind of falls into place. As you start to do this, you're gonna see a drastic change in your cinematography and you're gonna be able to get that cinematic look in almost any situation you're in because you're able to identify where the light is coming from. Okay, be on the opposite side of the light and then just start to move your camera around and find where that interesting shot is, where that shot or that creative look that you're going for is. A lot of the time when you're making documentaries or even low budget films, more often than not, we're working with locations that we either have no control over or very little control over. So sometimes we'll show up and it'll be someone's house, or maybe it'll be an office or a gym. The first thing that I do when I get to a location is I start scanning for strengths and weaknesses in that particular environment. I start looking out for, is there any architecture that is symmetrical, or are there any areas of the room or environment that have a lot of natural light? What can I manipulate in this space? Can I move furniture around? Can I move some things or shape the room that would actually look like an interesting shot? Now, if we come back to some of these shots in the mosque, I specifically shot toward these windows and created symmetry by putting my subject right in the middle of them and having the windows kind of surround this frame and him be the center point. And that's why it's so important to understand the strengths and weaknesses and utilize those strengths in that environment, because the viewer sees this beautiful location, but if you look at some of the behind the scenes shots, to the left and right, the area is a mess. There's an exit sign, there's an ugly door to the left of us. None of that looks cinematic, but I saw the potential, and that's what you have to do when you go into a location is look for the potential. Where is this cinematic beauty? I think that it's so important that as a storyteller and a cinematographer, especially a cinematographer, that you go the extra mile and you put in the extra work to make that shot the best it could possibly be. And I know this sounds so obvious, I really get it, but don't be lazy. Move furniture around if you need to. Figure out a way to rig up big, heavy lights and do the absolute best you can to create the most cinematic shot that you can, because trust me when I tell you, when you walk away from that and you feel like you didn't give it your absolute best, I always regret not grabbing all my equipment or not, rigging up all the lights that I brought in my arsenal or figuring out a way to make that shot that much better. And of course, you're gonna be in situations sometimes where time is an issue, and I get that, but the more you push yourself to get these cinematic shots, the better of a cinematographer you're gonna get, the better you're gonna become as a filmmaker and a storyteller. Now, for the last couple of years, we've been putting a documentary course together that breaks down the entire process from ideation to final edit and even pitching your documentary to major streaming platforms. And a very large part of this course is going to be about cinematography, getting our students to be able to achieve cinematic shots in any situation that they're in. So if you guys are interested in that, I'm gonna leave a link down below or right up here. You guys can check that out. Sign up for the email list. Our goal is to have this course come out by the end of the year. And of course, if you guys sign up for the email list, you'll be the first to be notified as soon as the course drops. So I'd like to thank you guys so much for stopping in, watching this video, hanging out with me, talking about cinematography and documentary filmmaking. That is my absolute passion. Thank you guys again. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Deuces.